try to read the scale. You can see that I put some points at the right hand side here, and we have our scales. We will call them scales. We have some objects also. Now in the next slide, we're going to have a better understanding, but let's first of all establish some things as we study. Okay, now we have a ruler. We have like a test tube A and B, and we also have a scale right here. Okay, now I've put a line on those scales. I've put a line on them just to indicate some things and to make us understand better. Let's start with the ruler. The ruler is the scale with which we measure length. Okay, we measure in centimeters and millimeters with our ruler. Let's focus on that. Of course, you know we have the meters and the kilometers as well, but let's make use of the ruler used for measuring millimeters and centimeters. Now on my ruler, you can see that my ruler measures in centimeters. Okay, I have some lines in between. I must have mentioned in the previous lessons that the lines in between are the millimeters. Okay, if you look at each of them, you would realize that in between one number and the other number, there are 10 numbers. Now that's what reading the numbers in between means. Let's look at this pencil, for example. The pencil is in between the first line of measurement, and it's more than 3, but not up to 4. So I cannot say my pencil is 3 centimeters. Neither can I say my pencil is 4 centimeters. So what does this mean? It means the measurement falls in between 3 and 4. So the purpose of this lesson is to be able to read the perfect or the actual measurement in between those two numbers. Now let's see. The numbers or the lines in between are called millimeters. How many lines are actually between 3 and 4? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then 10. The 10th will or the last one, which should be the 10th, will be it's going to fall on 4. That's the next centimeter number, if you understand that. The one that is supposed to be the last unit or the last digit falls on the next unit of measurement, that's centimeter. So my pencil is 3 centimeters, and okay, how do I read these lines in between? There are 10. Okay, and I have, first of all, let's look at the notes I put here so it would help us better. In what unit does the scale measure? It measures in centimeters. Now what is the interval between two numbers? The interval between each of the numbers is what? 1. Interval between 1 and 2 is 1. The interval between 2 and 3 is 1. That's the difference between the two numbers, right? Now, how many lines are in between the two numbers? We said earlier that we have 10. Okay, now how then do we determine what units we're going to be adding to 3 to know how much my pencil measures? Divide the interval between our numbers, which is 1, by the number of lines in between two numbers, which is 10. So 1 divided by 10 is what? 1 divided by 10 is 0.1. Remember, when we convert to decimal, we move the decimal point once to the left and it becomes 0.1. But remember, when we did mixed numbers, changing mixed numbers to decimals, remember that you replace your 0 with the whole number. So we already have a whole number, which is 3 in centimeters. And here we have, remember that we are now counting in 0.1. That will be 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. Do you understand that? We divided the number, the interval between each number, which is 1 on our scale. The interval between each number is 1, okay? And then the lines in between two numbers is 10. 1 divided by 10 is 0.1. That's when we convert it to decimal. The 0 is, or the 3, which is the whole number here, will replace our 0. So what we're going to be adding is 0.1. 0.1. The units that we'll be adding is 0.1. Now let's add. We have 3, then the next line will be 0.1, the next line will be 3.2, the next line is 3.3. So how many centimeters is my pencil now? My pencil is 3.3 centimeters. I know you understand that. Now let's see the other one, the test tube A and B that we have here. Now this test tube is measuring in millimeters. Please bear that in mind. It's measuring in millimeters, okay? Remember I said to you, in what unit does the scale measure? So we've established that. The second thing, what is the interval between the two numbers? Let's look at test tube A. We have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. The interval between two numbers is 100. Interval between 100 and 200 is what? 100. The difference between 200 and 300 is what? 100. So the difference between each of the numbers now is 10. Now what, 100. What's the next thing we need to do? How many lines are between two numbers? So how many lines are between 100 and 200? Let's check. Now with the way it is now, if I count, we have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5 is the one that comes out a little bit longer. 6, 7, 8, 9. The 10th one lands on 200. Okay, remember I said that with the ruler as well. Okay, this is our scale. Let us now see how we're going to measure the intervals in between. For our ruler, the intervals in between was to be adding 0.1 to our measurement. What are we going to be adding to this one now? Look at where that black highlighted line is. That's where the measurement reads, or the content in this test tube reaches that level. So we want to measure now. We already know that the interval between the numbers is 100. We also know that the lines in between are 10. Let's divide 100 by 10. What do we have? 10. It means that the units that will be adding to each of the bigger units here will be 10. So my measurement reads after 400 but not up to 500. Remember, the additional units for each of the lines now is 10, and we're measuring in millimeters. So my this, where does it fall? Is it on the first one after 400 or the second one? I think it's the second. Third, fourth. Okay, it's the second because it's covering it. It's the second one. Remember, we are adding units of 10. So the first one will be the first line, which we can see after the 400. We can see that a little bit is 400 and what? And 10. The second, which the line falls on, will be what? 420, because we'll be adding up additional 10 units. So what does it mean? The quantity of what I have in my test tube is 420 millimeters. Okay, let's go to the third one. Test tube B. The test tube B is in units of 10. Okay, but it's still measuring in millimeters. This first test tube A has an interval of hundreds. It's measuring in millimeters as well. I mean, the test tube B is measuring in millimeters. But let's see the interval between the numbers. This time around, it is 10. Difference between 10 and 20 is 10. Difference between 20 and 30 is 10. Now, on a scale, there is always a regular number between the intervals. Okay, it's either you have intervals of 5 or intervals of 10. Okay, all right, now this is an interval of 10 that we have in between the numbers. Now, how many lines do we have in between? We equally have 10 lines in between. We have difference of 10. We have lines 10. 10 divided by 10 is what? 10 divided by 10 is 1 rather. So 10 divided 10 is 1. It means each of the lines between those numbers will be 1. So for our measurements, we'll be adding additional 1 units. That means all the numbers, the tiny lines in between represent 1 unit. For our ruler, it was 0.1 units we were adding. For test tube A, it was, what were we adding in test tube A? 400 divide, okay, we were adding 10 in test tube A. Now in test tube B, we're adding 1 unit, because the difference between the interval is 10 and the lines in between is what? 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1, because of course, you know, the fourth point I have here says divide the interval by the number of lines to get the units between the two numbers. Okay, so it is 1 unit each. So the 10 lines represent 1, 1, 1. Now let's read. My measurements, or the contents I have in this test tube B, is between 50 and 60. It's not on 50 and it's not on 60, but it has passed 50. So what will I do? Now let's see the lines. I think it should be on the third line, 4, 5. Yes, because I can see the first line after 50, the second line after 50. It's the third line after 50 that we are not seeing. So that means this measurement is covering, because it's a black line, so it's covering that. So it means it's on the third line. Remember, we are adding units of 1. So what happens? From 50 we have 51, 52 and 53. So how many millimeters do we now say the contents in test tube B has? It has 53 millimeters. Okay, all right, well, I'm enjoying this. I hope you're also enjoying it, because I think it's very, very understandable, right? Okay, let's go to the scale. Now look at this scale. This scale has bold numbers from 1 to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We've moved on to the next one now. That's the measuring scale. Okay, now this scale, first thing we do, in what unit does this scale measure? If you can see it, well, it's not showing so well, but it's measuring in kilograms. In kilograms. Now in this case, what do we do? 1 kilogram, do we say, the second thing says that, what is the interval between the two numbers? It is 1. 1 is the interval, but it also says we should look at how many lines are between. If you look at how many lines are between the scale, it is 10. Between 1 and 2, we have 10 lines. Between 2 and 3, we also have another 10 lines. Okay, so now we're supposed to do 1 divided by 10, right? It's going to be 0.1. But to make it easy for you, how many grams make 1 kilogram? Great job! 1,000 grams make 1 kilogram. That means that one you see there represents 1,000 grams if we convert it. The 2 represents 2,000 kilograms. The 3 represents 3,000 kilograms. It's the same thing. 1 kilogram, pardon me, I'm sorry, not kilogram, 1,000 grams. The 2 represents 2,000 grams. The 3 represents 3,000 grams. It's the same thing to say 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams. I hope you understand that. So let's convert from kilograms to gram. So each of our numbers will represent 1,000. Okay, so 1 represents 1,000 grams, 2 represents 2,000 grams. Now, since we have converted to grams, how many lines? Okay, no, let us first of all look at the interval. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and so on. So what's the interval? What's the difference in between two numbers? 1,000 is the difference. Because between 1,000 and 2,000, there is 1,000. Between 2,000 and 3,000, the difference is 1,000 as well. Now, let's divide the interval by the number of lines. Remember I said earlier the number of lines is 10. 1,000 divided by 10 is what? Good job, is 100. So it means that the lines in between two measurements, the lines in between those two numbers will represent 100 grams each. So the units represent 100. Remember our ruler, the units were representing 0.1 and we were adding 0.1 till we got to 3.3. For our test tubes, the first one was adding 10 until we had 420 milliliters. The second one was adding in 1, so we had 53 milliliters. Now this 1000 grams divided by 10 lines is 100, so we'll be adding 100 to each of the units. Now let us see the line that I have here. The black line is not the red one. The black line here is in between 2 and 3, okay, but it's not even up to half of the measurement of 2 and 3. It's not in the middle, but it is somewhere in between. Let's see. I think this should be around on the 4th line, okay? And because we are adding in hundreds, that means we have 2 kilograms, 100, 200, 300, 400 grams. We're adding in hundreds, remember. So we have 2.4 kilograms. I hope you understand this one. We're adding in 100 grams. So we can either say 2 kilograms and 400 grams, or we say 2.4 kilograms rather. Okay? All right. Now let's go to the next one.